I'm so excited. I'm traveling through Europe and teaching for 2 months, and I get to connect with my boy Moritz Ulrich, who I know really well through the Jivamukti Yoga Method. I'm at his school, Peace Yoga Berlin. Let's go inside and have a mat chat with Moritz. Moritz. This is the beautiful Peace Yoga Berlin. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
What's up, guys? We're in Berlin. I'm at Peace Yoga with my friend Moritz Ulrich. We are going to have a mat chat today with some really interesting topics. Moritz and I got to know each other really well at the 2014 Jivamukti Yoga teacher training, where we were facilitating and teaching new teachers the Jivamukti method with Sharon Gannon and David Life. Moritz is on the faculty of the International Yoga Teacher Training for Jivamukti Yoga. He's a medical doctor, so this is going to get really juicy. And he's the founder of Peace Yoga Berlin. Moritz, welcome to the mat chat.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's do it. So Moritz, tell us how you got into yoga. It's always interesting, this point, the doorway into the practice, and then how long have you been doing the practice?
Yes. So I think I was about 13 or 14 when I first got in touch with yoga practices, but not really the asana practice. So it was really more about the spiritual part, the esoteric part. I was just reading a lot of things that weren't easy to be explained. It just came out of interest. And then I came across yoga philosophy. I was really into it. Through the yoga practices, I started to move and explore asana. Mm-hmm. And then one day, I think I was about like 15 or 16, I just thought, okay, why not take a class? I Googled a class, and the first class that came up, I just went, and then it went from there.
So you were hooked into the feelings from the class?
Yes, yes, definitely. And it just added up, and it gave a nice full round of things, like the philosophy, the esoteric part, plus the physical part and the sensation that came with it.
Yeah, for me, I was super athletic my whole life, but what was different is hooking into coordinating breath and movement. And that's what changed it from running a marathon, from weightlifting, from playing basketball, was this rhythmic ujjayi breathing. So how long have you been practicing altogether?
Practicing now for about 16, 17 years.
I was rereading Edwin Bryant's Yoga Sutras. I've been doing it on this trip, so I was looking a little bit this morning. I think it's 4 sutras he talks about asana, three or 4. It's very little. And the Bhagavad Gita talks about it only, I think, 2 or 3 times, and it's referencing the meditative seat. It's really the Hatha Yoga Pradipika in the Middle Ages where it gets to 12 asanas, but we are super charged and super obsessed. What's the switching point for you guys here where you feel people going a little deeper?
Yeah, right. I think first of all, I think there's nothing wrong with doing so many asana and having people being introduced to yoga through asana, which is mainly the case, I think, because it's different times. So I always feel yoga philosophy, we shouldn't like stick to a 400-year-old yoga philosophy book and just transfer it one-to-one into this time, but we should rather adapt it to our times. So I feel the asana is much more tangible for people to begin with. And then from there on, though, to answer your question, people are interested in spiritual stuff and in esoteric stuff, and they want to know more, and they want to ask the question kind of, who am I? But they have the tools of the physical practice that are easily accessible to them, and then they can use these more common tools and tools they're familiar with to then explore the more unfamiliar questions.
Yeah, it's like the physical practice creates enough space in the mind to maybe ask those questions, because we're slowing down, right? We're using our body to concentrate the mind, and then from there we can maybe look into more subtle things. I know that at Peace Yoga, the vegetarian diet is a big part of the practice here. How do you convey that to your students? And in New York City, I think it's nice at the school, the Jivamukti school, how they have the cafe with a macro plate that has rice, beans, vegetables. So you have everything sort of there. You take a class, you can have a little education, and maybe you'll go home and mimic one of these meals and slowly learn more. What do you guys do here as far as communicating healthy veganism or transitioning to veganism?
Yes, yes. So for me, it changed quite a bit over the years. I used to be a little more militant as a vegan and animal rights activist, and be a little more, you know, in your face kind of messages. But I figured that changing to a way more supportive attitude is much more inspiring to people. In other words, if somebody tells me, oh, you know what, I changed my diet and now I'm vegan once a week, instead of saying, oh, you should go all the way, I say, that's great, that's wonderful, that's a perfect step. And this is also how we would like to incorporate it into the yogic practices. Yes, we talk about ahimsa as non-violence, as a yogic practice, as means to yoga through a vegan diet, or how you can create a little more compassion towards other beings, and that can lead to a vegan diet kind of more naturally, instead of forcing it upon people. And the last part, because you mentioned healthy, I think for some people it's easier to understand some health benefits from a vegan diet and take this as their main motivator to become vegan or to become vegetarian. So I try to feel out what is the best way for different people. And in a group class, obviously, I bring in everything from all sides.
But as far as like, for me, I found that you need organizing principles to plan the diet.
First of all, I talk about veganism as a yoga practice. And yoga practices do not primarily mean that they're coming from a health point of view, right? I mean, there was Ayurveda as kind of like medicine, and then yoga as a path to enlightenment, which doesn't mean it should be incorporating healthy, beneficial eating habits. And I think nowadays we're so privileged to have all these amazing people online providing us with knowledge and with scientific knowledge, that I recommend these experts on these themes, either online or in a book, on a YouTube channel. You know, there's so many resources nowadays. So to make sure people are getting the nutrients they need while having a vegan diet coming from a yogic point of view, and at the same time even get healthier.
There was something different in Jivamukti, which my whole life, I've run marathons, any kind of goal I've set for myself has always had this driving, like, strong willpower behind it. When I walked into Jivamukti, they were chanting Loka Samasta, and it was the first time in my life where I'm like, I'm trying, but I'm also surrendering. It was really emotional for me. And so this subject of mantra, divinity, inviting the idea of God in a time where science rules. This is like, science is able to look into the atom and look into the biggest galaxies and observe new suns being born. So we're trusting science over everything else from the past, but at this time, Jivamukti Yoga is going strong with this idea of God. And you're a scientist. How do you put that together in a yoga class as a sort of tool to help the student find yoga?
Yes. Yeah, you're right. It might seem contradictory, right? Like signs and God subjects, or for some it's even...
And then multiple gods are also the weird ones for Western minds. It's like, okay, well, one God I can wrap my head around that knows everything, so...
Totally, totally. And for some yogis it's even contradictory, right? They said God has nothing to do with yoga, and science has nothing to do with yoga or God or whatever. There are multiple ideas out there. So for me, how I learned about science is that science is you're basically observing things, and then you're experiencing things, and then you have an outcome. But then maybe a year later there's another study done and the outcome might be different, or the perception might be different, or the observation might be different. And to me the same is really true for the yoga practices. It becomes like a laboratory on your yoga mat, and a laboratory for the physical body, for my mental body, for the spiritual mind, for the spiritual questions. And I have been lucky enough, I can say, to not being raised religiously, like not in a specific way. So I didn't have any form of God in my head, or a specific word, or a way to approach him or her. So I was really open to just fill in my own ideas. And this is what I love about the idea of God in yoga, as Patanjali describes it as Ishvara, which basically means something higher of your choice, something universal, something cosmic of your choice. So he doesn't even give a name, he doesn't give a form. So it's up to me as a practitioner to choose.
In India, they worship a stone. There's a symbol, and so it can be anything. It can be as abstract as worshiping a stone or a tree in your backyard. Maybe you can see the interconnectedness of all things. And so that's the way I look at it, as like symbols. Like everyone, I used to beg my mom to buy me the latest Nike sneakers because the symbol was connected with Michael Jordan slam dunking the ball, and I was like, she's like, you don't need sneakers. You have nice sneakers. I'm like, no.
Yeah, because you had the emotional
connection to the Nike symbol, meaning my game would get better. And so I use these symbols, Om Namah Shivaya. All of these connections are ways of training my mind and setting it in a groove, rather than looking at the idea of God outside of myself and I'm going to be punished, but really more as a tool to concentrate the mind. And I think maybe that's what Patanjali is saying, is that surrender can create a concentration, or at least soothe the mind.
Yes. To me, it also, God, or the word God, becomes a symbol, as you said, right? A symbol for something that is ever present, that is universal in the sense of it is in everything and everybody. Which makes it easier for me to understand the idea of union, right? Yoga is union from the small and higher self. And for me, it's easier to put a name on it and to put a form on it. I always use the picture of, like, imagine sitting in front of an altar which is empty, right? And you bow down, or have a nice statue on it and bow down. To me, it just feels nicer and more emotional to bow down towards a form or a figure.
And in bowing down, there's great release that I don't have to do this all by my own effort. And there's anxiety when you have to do it all by yourself. If you feel like you could have some good luck from the universe or God or something external and bigger than you, it's sort of like a little easeful. I am interested in something, if you could explain a little bit about how a Sanskrit mantra works in terms of toning the cerebral cortex and the different parts of the brain. It's one of those languages, like English isn't very vibrational. It's all it's out here. So can you explain to us a little bit about how the mantras work, and then that feeling, like there's nothing more unifying than sitting down and 70 people chanting on the harmonium. Like, how does it, through sound, bring us together with the mouth positions?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think the experience is the most crucial, no matter what scientific explanation there might be. Secondly, though, you mentioned there are mouth positions, and there are 5 mouth positions in Sanskrit that definitely are related also to different energy points in the mouth, and you're directing energy through your whole head and in different areas of your head, but also on a more, like, let's say, gross level. It is really, you have to be attentive. You have to be much more attentive than using your mother tongue or most other languages that don't have these mouth positions. Plus, Sanskrit is the only language I really know that has these elevated rules about sound, right? Everything is meant to sound nice and sound harmoniously. So through sound, we're really changing the form of molecules around us and inside of us. I mean, this has been proven scientifically over and over and over again. And with Sanskrit mantras, people were able to show how these nice forms appeared in water molecules, I think, or water crystals that they have used. And the last thing I want to say about Sanskrit is really, it's not about getting it right. It is really, because when I started Sanskrit, I thought, okay, I'm going to get there, I'm going to understand the grammar, I'm going to learn everything, like Latin or French.
It's an ocean.
It's impossible. And as soon as I realized that, it became a practice of devotion, a practice of bhakti, that I will never ever be able to understand it fully. And I feel it's kind of in there. It's a yoga practice in itself to let go.
Yeah, my friend Greg Nardi told me, I was taking lessons with him, and he said, it's a self-correcting language, guy. If you keep chanting it, it will start to adjust itself. So it's in the practice, and I think that's what yoga is the daily repetition of the practice is what anchors the mind in the groove of yoga. Can you share a little bit of the expanded toolbox you recommend to people if they're sore and they can't come to class or they don't want to do asana? What are like 3 or 4 other things people can do at home to stay in the yoga practice without using their body?
Right. I mean, I think you're always using your body in the end. So to me, everything is physical. Even that would be number 1, meditation is a physical practice because you're using your body, you sit still. So meditation is definitely number 1. You can do it on a chair. You could even do it lying down if sitting up isn't possible for you.
Or on an airplane.
Or on an airplane, wherever you are. Or walking, right? You don't even have to be still. So any form of attention training. Then number 2, singing, mantra, I think to me is a very direct and effective way. Because as soon as you start singing, you aren't really able to think of anything else. So I think that's a major benefit, to just calm the whole chit-chat in your mind for a while. And number 3, I feel any form of yoga nidra, which is a specific form of yogic relaxation, using shavasana, using the corpse seat, lying down on your back, and having suggestions that you're repeating to yourself or having recorded on a CD, can be very powerful tools. But then also coming from an Ayurvedic point of view, I feel we should always figure out, why don't we like asana, let's say, or even if we do like asana, why are we only going to a restorative class or only going to a fast-paced vinyasa class? So maybe the thing we don't really like could be the actual beneficial thing to do.
Right. And I think that's what's interesting, is there's parts of this practice that really push your buttons. There's parts that, like for me, the physical came super easy, but it took a decade for me to finally go to Vipassana meditation, turn in my phone and just shut up for 10 days. And learn a technique that I could have wherever I went. So that was harder, and it was just sitting still. I'd rather go to 2 to 4 hours of asana and sweat my tail off every day. But it does bring things up that can show you how arbitrary our likes and dislikes are, and how on a baseline level the mind is very empty, and these are all really impressions. So it takes a while to understand that we're really actually working with the mind, when we come from that physical place. What is Bhakti Yoga to you, and like how do your students respond to your expression of Bhakti Yoga?
So I think really, I mean, Bhakti, how it's translated usually, right, is to devotion or humility, being humble, all these ideas, and the idea of God. Again, to me, as a tool, to be used as a tool to something that makes it something that makes it easier to bow down. And as you said, for most people, is so new and unfamiliar and also uncomfortable. Same like it's uncomfortable for people doing a handstand and going upside down. And I think it being uncomfortable holds a lot of potential, because they can tap into new spaces, mental spaces, emotional spaces that they have never experienced before. And I experienced that in class. Like I sometimes do 5 to 10 minute chanting, and I know 80% of the people in the room probably are shocked by it, or, you know, they don't like to use their voice, they don't even know what they're singing, they're embarrassed. But in the end, I get a lot of positive feedback from people who were only into the so-called physical part and the asana part, that they even got more cosmic experiences in these 10 minutes than in the rest of the class. And I feel, as you said, it is working. And to me, it comes back to science, right? It's observing what works, and then you just repeat it.
How do you convey the proper way to use touch with your apprentices? And when you're at these large teacher trainings, how are you guys handling this topic at a time where it seems like the entire Western world is really kind of on edge about touch and appropriate touch?
So first of all, I think we should acknowledge that it is a very sensitive topic, and maybe for a long time we haven't thought about it, or we haven't, really discussed it. I think the open discussion about it is number one, to me, most important. And I know New York is trying these things out, and I experienced the same thing with cards or yes or no things in America. And I think it's interesting to see how it turns out and how it works for people. You're right, it might be a little different in Europe.
Yeah.
For different reasons. I think it's just the time and the location for whatever reason, but it is different. We don't have these issues being brought up so often.
Right.
But I feel for us as yoga teachers who are used to do a lot of hands-on assists, it is amazing to take some time, as you suggested, to not use them. Not as a way to get rid of them, but to actually enlarge my toolbox. Like, can I only also convey the same message without using the same touch, or maybe is it more subtle touch, or is it a verbal approach, or whatever it is.
That's what I need to do.
But even though I feel the touch is a very important part, because in our culture, touch is so, I mean, it's seen as something almost aggressive. Like, the other day, I picked up something from a store, and by accident, I just touched the guy's hand, you know, like picking the thing, and I said sorry. And then afterwards, I felt, oh, why did I actually apologize for it? It's just, you know, accidentally touching even. But touch has become something almost like a taboo. Yeah. And I think we should dive deeper into that. Why did that happen? And where is this whole fear of touching and being touched actually coming from?
How do you know when someone's ready and green lighted, like, to go? Yeah,
I mean, I think it is a lifelong practice.
Yeah.
And I agree that the Jivamukti apprenticeship program is definitely a great way. It's very, very intense, as you said, and you do it over and over again, and you do it also with friends and other teachers. But in the end, you have to do it. I mean, there is no other way than practicing it. So I basically give them the green light from the beginning, because I feel they have to do it. And they just have to learn about basic rules of communication, because this is what it comes down to. It is a form of communication. You're touching another person or you're talking to another person. It's always the same rules. You need to have mutual consent. And you have to learn the ways how you can feel that the consent is there, whether through verbally agreeing, whether through cards, as in New York City, or feeling and using your other skills that you're having.
As a massage therapist, I learned something really powerful, is that my intention is transferred 1,000 times more through touch. So if I'm not present, if I'm thinking about something else, or if I'm thinking about being attracted to a person, that's going to come through in your touch. So I clarify that when I enter the room, and I acknowledge certain desires and things that might come up, and then I shelf them and say, these are healing hands, they're meant to help people. So your intention is going to be picked up. So the intention has to be clear and rooted in healing, in nurturing, and supporting the student. I want to use the practice as the teacher, but I know I've grown from holding other people with 20 years of practice ahead of me as my teacher. And then in their presence, I have a little bit of a submissive energy with personal boundaries. So it's a touchy thing now, because there's been a million guru scandals, there's been sexual boundaries crossed, and we are using touch, and it's tricky. So what are your thoughts on the student-teacher relationship, especially when it comes to like submission to a teacher in this time where that's gotten bizarre?
So to me, it's all about talking and informing people about the idea of guru, because it is important to me, as you said, same thing. I feel in all modern old yoga scriptures are mentioning it, that you need a form of guru. But then explaining to people and teaching people what a guru is, it is not a hierarchical thing and somebody saying, oh, I'm a guru. It is, I am choosing a guru. And I think that makes a big difference. I am choosing if I want to bow down, or if I want to use honorifics when I'm addressing another person as saying Guruji or whatever it might be. So I'm willingly and freely choose this other remover of darkness, which is one translation of the word guru. And then it can become very powerful and holds a lot of potential in it. Coming from the other side as a teacher, I have to remind myself every day that I'm just the instrument for the teachings. And that's something my very first yoga teacher told me when I started teaching, she said, humility, humility, humility is like the main ingredient you need to be a great yoga teacher. So even when people approach you, or they bow down, or they thank you for changing their lives and all these things, it's nice to hear, but they don't lift up the unhealthy part of your ego, but you can just pass it through and use the energy to, support more people and assist people. Because you're not, I think as a teacher, you're not really helping others, because that implies that they're kind of like they need your help. But I want to be there as a facilitator. I like this word actually, to facilitate.
Or maybe a guide.
Or a guide.
A guide,
yes.
Yeah, and also I think the student these days, like with me, around our teachers, Sharon Gannon and David Life, like I've always admired their practice. What I love about them is they are practice-based yogis. They're not talking out of just a text, out of their head. They're doing morning sadhana every single day. The spiritual practice is giving them a certain energy that you can feel when they walk in the room. But at the same time, I've always had healthy boundaries. When I finished the training, I said, I'm going to teach at the school 5 years in a row as a service to the school for what it's done for my life. Like I want to submit and do everything their way. And it never hurt me to do that, because I always felt like my own personhood and my sense of personal boundaries were intact paired with that submission. And it seems like a yin and yang, but I think we all need to realize that in our lives, even with something like our boss, we need personal boundaries. Your boss can ask you to work 4 weekends in a row, and you might be like, look, I want to see my family. You need to stand your ground in certain situations. So each human is learning this in their own way, and I think each teacher on this planet is also learning the edge of their boundaries. So it's one of the more valuable life lessons, is this idea of internal boundaries, like what's my limit? And I think we can all find that balance with a little bit of awareness. So Moritz, thank you for doing this mat chat with us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Where can students learn more about Peace Yoga Berlin, the work you're doing here, and all of your online teachings? Where can we learn more?
Yeah, so of course you can visit us in Berlin. Come to Peace Yoga and visit me on Instagram, down.berlin. Follow me there. I try to share little thing every day coming from yoga philosophy, also talking about more, as you mentioned before, entrepreneurship and how that can be combined with the yogic teachings. And something I have online, if you're interested in playing harmonium, and chanting is an online harmonium course that you find under yogaonlineschool.com, and it should be right there for you.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you next time. Please visit Peace Yoga Berlin and practice with Moritz and his amazing teachers here.
Bhavantu.
with us. What is the overall sentence by sentence translation for that?
Yes, so one interpretation for this is, may all beings everywhere be happy and free, and may the thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and to that freedom for all.
Wow. Thank you, Moritz, for sharing that with us.
Thanks.